All right. Welcome to the Intermission Orchestra Eighth Arranging Workshop. Today I am joined with Lewis, who is going to be our guest speaker today and walk us through his process, particularly with Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Endgame medley. A few words about Lewis. So if you don't know who Lewis is a PhD student here at UCSD researching signal and image processing. He has received his bachelor's in liberal arts from St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, with additional study in electrical engineering at Stony Brook University at Long Island, New York. He is an established arranger, producer, engineer, engraver, and performer under the video game label Materina Collective since 2016. Lewis is one of the most distinguished members of Intermission Orchestra, putting on incredible performances of arrangements from games such as Final Fantasy and Legend of Zelda. So, thank you for coming, Lewis. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for getting me to jump back in and do this. I hope that what I say is helpful to people, and I hope it offers a perspective that perhaps people haven't otherwise heard.
All right. So we're going to be doing this somewhat interview style. So I'm going to first ask Lewis, what in regards to the Legend of Zelda Endgame medley, what was like the vision you had in regards to making this?
Yeah, so basically the vision I had was this.
The moment has finally come. Brace yourself, Ganon, for the sting of my revenge!
Doing a production where we provide the music and the game, we have the visuals, we have the voice lines, and we have the sound effects, but without the music from the game. And I previously had done the earlier Breath of the Wild medley, and that was successful and people liked it, but it didn't really have a big ending. It was bookended by Cass's theme, and I had wanted to do an arrangement of Hyrule Castle. And once I got through the game and once I beat it, there's a lot of good music at the end. A lot of people tend to rat on the Breath of the Wild soundtrack because a lot of it is ambient and not like big orchestral stuff, but the whole end game is all big orchestral stuff, and it's good music, and I wanted to make this experience for the audience. Hopefully most of the audience had either already played it and already beaten it, or were not interested and weren't going to, so hopefully we weren't spoiling it for anyone. But yeah, I want to give them the experience of seeing the game being played sort of live and us providing the music. I will say I was inspired in particular by one other show. You may have heard of a little video game called Journey, originally on PS3 and now on PS4 also, and on PC. You can get it on Epic Games Store. It was like a sort of a tech demo kind of thing for PS3 back in the day, and it became a sort of the flagship for games as art. It's this very beautiful game that doesn't have any words. It's just sort of this flowing kind of style of gameplay. And I was fortunate to be involved with the world premiere of Journey Live, which was the same kind of thing that we did, except they actually played the game live this was at MagFest in 2017, 2018, I think. And they played a build of the game that didn't have any of the music in it, but still had the sound effects. They played it live. They had several people from the community come and play it live in front of the audience, an audience of 2,000 people at MagFest, and a live orchestra, a small orchestra, maybe about 20 people. And Austin Wintory is the composer, and the soundtrack for that game is a lot more dynamic than Breath of the Wild, more like the Breath of the Wild battle theme, where it's constantly shifting what's happening in the music based on what's happening in the battle. So Journey, the whole soundtrack is like that. So all the performers actually had iPads with music that was updating in the future. So they're sort of constantly sight reading what the next music was, and based on what was happening in the game. And Austin was controlling what was going to happen next. And it was really fantastic experience. I was actually sort of the second in command for the lighting for this. I was sitting behind the lighting guy and telling him, okay, this is going to happen. You should set up for this. So yeah, that was great to see. And this is, obviously we can't quite do it live. That would be a little bit tougher, but with the video, we were able to make this happen and make this kind of big production. And I hope everyone got into the music and got into the game, and I hope that we did Nintendo proud.
All right, cool. So I think with like this grand vision you had for this piece, you know, having all of these moving parts, the video and the orchestra playing and the click tracks that you had, they had to start somewhere. So I'm curious if you could explain to us what specific process that you used in order to make your vision become a reality.
Yeah, so this is the most advanced music tech project I've done in terms of not a hardware project like this stuff, but like, you know, a production. This is all of the different software that I know how to use, and some stuff I had to learn just for this production. It helped that I had done the same thing with Twilight Princess the previous year, but fortunately, basically, we didn't have to do any fancy stuff on the game side. We just took the visuals from the trailer and we played the music, and I spliced in a couple of audio samples. That was not how we did it this time. So yeah, so the overall process, basically, the first step is transcription. So I should mention that I was not the only person working on this. Brandon was also did a substantial chunk of the transcription and arranging. So each of us arranged different sections. We basically combine that. So when I transcribe and arrange, I do that in Reaper. This is not the original project I transcribed and arranged pieces in, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically, I transcribed the Hyrule Castle section and the Dark Beast Ganon through ending sections, and I transcribed them in Reaper with this kind of process. So it's like, here's let me move these for a second. So this is a MIDI, this is virtual instruments playing all the instrument parts. And so I can like be listening to the original. Let's see, original, where do I have the original? I don't think I put in the original in this project. So I don't have the original in this project, but I have the original in one track. And I can, with one button, I can either solo the original music or I can solo what I'm playing. So let's see. So this is a part where yeah, so anyway, I don't have the original music here, but imagine I have the original music here. I can press one key and solo the original music and then listen to it, and then switch back to the MIDI and listen to the MIDI and see if I, you know, got it right. And so then I like have one of these MIDI items open and you know, writing in the notes with the piano roll like this. So that's how I transcribe, and I can have multiple parts open here. So let's see, trumpet and violin or whatever. And so I can be working on multiple parts at the same time, and then just switch instantly to hearing the original, which again, I don't have set up in this project. Yeah, so that helps a lot because you don't have to like stop the playback, switch over to YouTube, try to find the little section that you're trying to transcribe again. You can just sort of, you know, hear the other version, hear it again. Yeah, so this is Reaper. Reaper is a digital audio workstation. It is actually quite cheap. It's only $60, but it is as powerful as Pro Tools and more stable than Pro Tools. Why have I lost my video? I've lost my video because I muted that. So yeah, if anyone is interested in more advanced stuff than just MuseScore, this is an important tool. So anyway, I transcribed most of the sections of this sort of in independent projects, and Brandon transcribed the Ganon fights, Calamity Ganon, first half and second half, and he transcribed his in MuseScore. I took the MIDIs from all those pieces and put them into Dorico and engraved it. I have that here. This is the score. Probably have all seen it with the Zelda on the front. And I did the engraving, and Dorico makes it easy, but it is still a long project, and there's a lot of details to work out and get right. And I'll talk about formatting and engraving stuff in a bit. Then I took the MIDI out of Dorico and put it back into Reaper and reassigned all the virtual instruments, because I didn't have a Reaper project that already had all the pieces put together. So I needed to do this because I need to actually edit the video together. So this is like the definition of the timeline of the whole piece. So I have the virtual instruments so I can hear what we're doing, and then I have the gameplay. I'm not going to go into too much detail about how I did the gameplay. Basically, the short answer is I hacked the Wii U, I dumped the game and the Wii U's operating system onto the computer, set up an emulator, did a bunch of back-end BS to get this to work, and then recorded stuff with OBS and played it with the PS3 controller. So this was all actually captured on a computer with an emulator for Breath of the Wild. And because what we need for this whole project is sound effects and voice lines, but no music. So I actually went into the game's files and picked out each of the music files that we were going to be playing ourselves, and found a music file that was silence, because the game actually had a music file that was silence, and just copied and pasted that over all of those. So I basically got rid of all the music in the game while still having sound effects and voice lines. So that, like, now my moment has finally come. Normally there's music here, but
It's finally come. Brace yourself, Ganon, for the sting of my revenge.
yeah. So that's how that happened. So then I did everything together. There's a few different takes of playing, and you can see some jump cuts here where I went from one scene to another. I tried to make it as seamless as possible. There's some more cheating in terms of video stuff, and there was also some cutscenes like this one. You can see there's a lot more on my screen here. That's because this cutscene actually had the music and sound effects baked together into the same file, so I couldn't just get rid of the music. It actually, the way I was able to do this is the game actually runs in Dolby 5.1 surround, and for all of the pre-baked audio, it's actually rendered in 5.1 surround and stored on disk that way. So I was able to take like center channel and like rear channels and do a mix of those that didn't really have the music in it, or the music was very quiet. And that was what I used in addition to the MIDIs. So at the end of this process, I had an exported video file that has the entire thing. And let me mention the click track also. The click track is right here. If I unmute it, actually should solo it. So what it looks like is it's just, this is what it will sound like. So I have a couple of things. I have, normal clicks is just MIDI notes. It's this, and then just like on a synthesizer playing those notes. And it's just a looped pattern of whatever notes in the time signature, and the time signature changes. So every time the time signature changes, I have to change the pattern here. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I also added some stuff for sections. So there's a little alarm when the time is going to start up before the count-in. So I added that little alarm, and then I added on the downbeat of a section, there's this white noise. So that's, and you can hear this is all in the right channel, just in your right ear. And so I put it through the video through an effect that would export all of the sound from the video into the left channel, and the click track into the right channel, and then render this as a video file. And this is the video file that was played at the performance. So then with the mixer live, we have the left channel routed into the PA, the loudspeakers that played out to the audience, and the right channel is routed through the click track distribution network, which I built the previous year for the Twilight Princess piece, and that goes into everyone's earbuds. For those watching on YouTube, we did not have enough hardware to give everyone in the orchestra a click track. We just gave the like section leaders from each section a click track. Unfortunately, I was able to do some last minute finagling and get the percussion. So pretty much every percussion player had one earbud with the click track. which is very, very important. So we did that. We had the concert. We recorded the concert in like 27 channels with all these. This is the project for after the concert. This was post-production, and this was pre-production. This is post-production. So this is our orchestra recordings. If I solo this. So you can hear like there's a mic in the front. But that doesn't capture so much of everything. So there's mixing done between all of the mics. And then I had to, I didn't really have to resynchronize the video too much, but I had to do all the overlay stuff. So like for this, with these and with the scrolling sheet music, that was a process. I exported the sheet music from Dorico with a PDF with like 300 inches long paper, so that it was all on one page continuously. And then I pulled that out of PDF into like a PNG format with GIMP, then put that into a texture in Blender and actually animated it in Blender. So I have a 3D object that's moving slowly across the screen, and that actually changes speed. So let's say here, go back a little farther. It's moving slowly, and then when we get to A, it goes faster. It's a little subtle, but I needed to actually change the speed. So that was all done in Blender with like custom animations. And that was rendered as a video file, which then got overlaid with the other video files, and there was some BS I had to do with Reaper and transparency and stuff. But that's what's all up on the top of this is the video for the post-production video. And then, you know, when you get to title cards, there's like items for the title cards that get faded in and out. And yeah, we didn't have enough applause, so I had to loop the applause. If you listen, it's actually the same applause over and over. But yeah, that's post-production for you. Yeah, did I miss any pieces of the tool chain?
You talked so. Reaper and Dorico, and I think that's everything.
Yeah, I mean, for most people, what, you know, if you're taking away from this anything about how you should do your engraving and arranging and stuff, I would say Reaper has a free trial. It has basically it's like a shareware trial. It'll just, you get a 30-day free trial, and then after that, it'll just say, hey, this isn't free. Make sure to buy it, and you can say okay, and you can keep using it. So you can try it. You don't even need good quality virtual instruments. I have like a 1 terabyte hard drive in there with virtual instruments, but you can use cheap sound fonts that you can find online. You don't have to pay anything. And then you can transcribe in Reaper, and it's just a much more pleasant experience overall than directly transcribing in MuseScore. And then you can take the MIDI out of Reaper, put it into MuseScore, and then fix the formatting and make it look nice. Perhaps I should jump into the formatting then.
Yeah, like, can we talk about formatting? So, you know, it's one thing to write down things with through MIDI on the piano roll, but then adding that kind of interpretation through the sheet music is a whole different set of skill sets. So, if you could talk about some of the interesting little things that you had to do in regards to the sheet music.
Yeah, so let me see if I can find some of these. Dorico is a nice program. It's better than Sibelius, and Sibelius is better than MuseScore. So it does a lot of stuff for you. There's a lot of stuff in terms of like cues. Well, I'll talk about the cues in a minute. There's a lot of stuff it does automatically. Unfortunately, it is a little slow, especially when working with a piece that is this big. Firefox is even struggling to draw the piece with all of the, you can see how it's loading in like this. What do I say? The biggest takeaway I would say is just, it makes a huge difference, the quality of the engraving for the results of how it sounds. And you might really not think that, but if there's a part that's easy, that looks hard, if you engrave it in a way that looks easy, then people will play it better. So let me see if I can find a part that that is true of. Let's see. All right, here's one. So this is something
real fast,
yeah.
Critton. So engraving is basically the act of putting stuff onto sheet music and making the sheet music. That's what engraving is.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of typesetting for music. So here's an example. This is a part. This is the theme for when the well, it's used in a couple of different places. This is this is in the middle of Calamity Ganon fight. So this part sounds like dum da da dum da da dum da 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 da. So it's not trivial to play. It's not easy at all, but it's not like ridiculously hard. Everyone was able to play it by the end of the performance. But what I have here, this is something that's easy to do in Dorico. It might be harder to do in MuseScore, but this means just repeat the last 2 bars. So when the musician sees this, they see, okay, there's a hard pattern, and now they see that they're going to get 6 chances to practice that, right? Even just in the first sight reading. So they don't have to put any mental energy the second time through into try to reading the music. They just have to put mental energy into doing the same thing they did, except less mistakes. And so by the end of getting up to here, they've played it once through, and they've already had 6 times to practice it. Now, if you actually repeated the same thing, they might get the idea the second or third time, oh, wait a minute, this is the same thing, but then it requires mental energy the next time it changes. So by writing it out this way, it sort of limits the amount of mental energy they need to put into it. Another example would be this. If you wrote out, I don't know of anybody in Intermission who would write out tremolos as just the repeated note, but this looks so much nicer. It's just a note that lasts that long, that happens to be you do this with your arm while you're playing the note. You don't have to think about it as like, oh, how many times do I have to do this before it gets to the next note? Let's see. There's one other major one that I want to talk about in terms of cues. But let's see if I can find some other little bits that are important. Getting key signatures right is important. Oh, here's one I just found. This is kind of dumb, but you might be able to see here. I have the piano part, dum 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 dum, and then I have something that looks weird, and I put not a typo in parentheses, because that solves the mental energy that the person would have to go through of saying, is this wrong? What was this supposed to be? Should I bring it up to Lewis? Lewis is busy. How much do I need to? It just saves all that. Okay, that's right. Just another advertisement for Dorico here. Dorico has these, you can put all kinds of like jazz ornaments on things. And so this is for the French horns. They're playing I can't quite hit that note with my own voice, but they're a big horn rip. And so instead of writing out specific notes to hit, because you could write this with grace notes, I don't care what notes they're going to play when they're going up to it. I want it really loud, and I want it to sound really good. So you put in that, and then they can do whatever, and it sounds good. One more thing I'll talk about in terms of cues. So I'm not sure how easy this is to do in MuseScore, but for Dorico, it's actually a little slow, but it's possible. It's not too hard to do. You can make cues. And so what I did is, for all the percussion parts, I made one single staff that had cues for the rest of the orchestra for the entire piece. So for instance, this is snare drum part. So there's this pattern. Now already the performer sees, okay, I'm repeating this a whole bunch, and then they can not even have to look at their music again. They can look at the cues and they can say, okay, I heard the piano do this, I hear the trombone do this line, and it switches back and forth around every time between which which part they're listening for. So it's like violin is this, and then xylophone is this, and then trumpet is this, and that goes on and on for the whole piece. So they don't even have any rests. When they have rests, they're just reading the cues. And so this combined with the click track really made it possible for the percussion to not get way off. Because with the click track, if you get off, the show's ruined. You can't get back on because, yeah. And we actually did get off during a part that got cut out of the YouTube video. The ending, not true ending section. We had to throw that out of the YouTube video because we got off and yeah, it went bad. So that's the risk of these kind of performances. Yeah, engraving is it takes a lot of time, even if you're doing sort of the minimum. In terms of what I would suggest for people from intermission, pay attention to what key things are in, and pay attention to what accidentals you're using. If you have something in, let's say right here, this is in G minor, it's probably, let's say this note here. So we're in G minor, there's two flats, there's a note that you want, an A flat or a G sharp. So which note do you put in? If you put in an A flat, it's going to be easier for somebody to read than if you put in a G sharp. It especially goes for, runs and places like that. So let's find a run. So this is in open key. This is a open key / atonal section. There's no key signature for anybody. But right now it's basically A minor, or sort of A open fifth, but basically A minor. So if this was written as like G flat and then A flat and then A natural, that's not easy to play. But if it's D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, that's an A minor, melodic minor, or actually A major scale that everyone has practiced over and over. So a performer can see this and instantly play it right. But if you change the accidentals that you use, it's the same notes, but they will have to think about it and it won't come out right the first time. And the reason you care so much about having it come out right the first time is that the better it is the first time they see it, then that's their baseline and they can improve from there. Whereas if you take a couple of rehearsals to get them to just know how the music sounds, then you've lost that amount of time for actually getting it to sound better. But we can get into the musician wrangling. Well, maybe this is a good time to get into the musician wrangling.
That's what actually exactly where I wanted to go to next. So you have your vision, you have your score. On paper everything sounds great, and then you enter the rehearsal and things fall apart initially. So this is a little bit outside of the scope of the arranging workshop, but most of our arrangers tend to end up conducting. So what kind of leadership, wrangling, as you say, that you have to do in order to make sure that the music that your vision is realized in real time with real people?
Yeah. So there's a lot of pieces of it. One whole sort of chunk of things is knowing your music, knowing what it's supposed to sound like, having practiced the conducting. Like, you don't want to have your confusion be adding to the slowdown during rehearsal. The second thing would be, most of the time, in my experience with intermission, okay, maybe I should phrase it this way. The players in intermission are decent. They're not professional. Some of them are of professional quality. There's a few. I don't think I'm quite of professional quality. There's some folks in the group who really are. Those folks will get things right pretty much all the time. But most people don't practice, don't look at the music in advance, and that's fine. Like, we tell people to practice, but like, being honest about what the situation is important. So I don't go in there expecting people will have looked at the music, except in specific cases which is where the wrangling gets in. But yeah, so I expect that people are sight reading. I expect that people will only ever be looking at the music during the rehearsals. So sort of the two biggest things are, number one, I want as much of the allotted time to actually be the orchestra playing music as possible. To minimize as much as possible the breaks between, like, when people aren't playing. Cut people off, say, you know, trumpets, watch that place and measure this, it's this, and then, okay, everybody, we're starting at this place, 1, 2, 3, 4, go. A lot of our conductors sort of stand there and think about things. You want as many people to be playing as much of the time as possible, because that is their practice time. The second thing is that when things don't sound good, most of the time it is people are playing your music wrong. Not, oh, they didn't put the right emotion into it, or they didn't think about the phrasing, or the dynamics are off. Most of the time it's just they're not getting the notes and they're not getting the rhythms. If they're getting the notes and the rhythms perfectly, then you can start talking about dynamics and phrasing. Some of the dynamics and phrasing is stuff that is on you as the arranger, that you want to have, put dynamic markings in your score. And of course, you can put them and the performers can ignore them. That often happens. But putting them, and then also just having the arranging be such that the dynamics aren't maybe as important. Maybe it sounds good even if everyone is sort of just all playing it at mezzo forte all the time. So part of that is on you, but a lot of that is just the players are often just going to be making mistakes. So being able to hear mistakes by ear, being able to identify them and say, whether saying them out loud and calling people out, I tend to call people out more. Other people don't tend to follow my style quite as much. But at least to know yourself that what is going wrong here is these people haven't practiced it. Even if you're not going to say that to them, just to know that is important. Because if you stand up there and you're like, oh, maybe try playing it louder, and then go over it again, like that doesn't necessarily help. But the other side is the wrangling. And when I say wrangling, I mean everything that's happening outside of the rehearsal. This piece could not have happened without stuff happening outside of rehearsal. In particular, interfacing with percussion and interfacing with piano. And a little bit of choir. The choir, this was not too difficult of a piece for them. For piano, before I started on this piece, I transcribed just the Dark Beast Ganon ridiculous part. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, this stuff. I transcribed this stuff and I gave it to the pianists, and I was able to recruit our final choice of fantastic pianists. But I went with them for like weekly sessions. They would practice offline, come in, I would listen to them. I made like piano only renders at slower and at the full speed, and click track renders, slower and full speed, and went over with each of them individually and jointly, because this is one of the hardest. This piano part is one of the hardest piano parts I've ever heard in a video game. So this isn't just how to get Intermission Orchestra to make your music sound good. This is like how to get people who are quite good but not professional pianists play something that's extremely difficult. And then percussion, I went to a couple sectionals. The percussion parts are arranged by person. So like there will be one line, there's one part, let me pull one of them up again. So this is like snare drum and shaker. So there'd be one person that's assigned to snare drum and shaker. And the order that they're listed is in order of importance. So that if there was only 3 percussionists, we would get percussion 1, percussion 2, and percussion 3. And then those would have covered enough of the parts to be, in order of importance. So yeah, if your piece is tough, go in and talk to the performers who are the critical sections. You know, if it has a high trumpet part, go over it with the trumpet section before you choose the piece. Ask them if they think they can play it. Send them samples of it. See if they can do it, and just have them engaged. A lot of this is just like being able to engage and keep the attention of 100 people at the same time, and being able to have that kind of you know, energy and willingness to call people out. And you know, I guess I get a bit of a reputation with all of this. I know some people, I hope that the quality of the results justify some of it, and I hope that people don't take it personally when I call them out. But I do know people think that I'm this, you know, precise person, but it kind of, you know, you want something like this to happen, you gotta be precise.
All right. So, and now I guess I just have one more. Hold on. Actually, we have a question. What about dealing with absent people who you might need for solos at rehearsal?
I mean, you try to talk to them about that in advance. You work around it when you can. I mean, there's lots of different sections in these. So if there was a bunch of people out that were important for one, then we would just work on other parts. But yeah, you try to work that out in advance. I don't have like the sage advice about that. It's just.
Yeah, I would also, I think like, yeah, and you can use this like piece of advice in whatever walks of life, is that communication is key. You know, communicating with your, you know, soloists, your other members, you know, communication is the way like everyone can be on the same page. You know, it's the easiest thing to do. But anyways, so finally, I think I have just a personal question. Were you happy with the results from the performance, and what's something that you look back on and wish you could have, you know, done differently?
I'm happy to answer this, but there is one more piece on our agenda, which is the collaboration part.
Oh boy, actually, yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah, so.
Was I happy with the results? Yes. I like the video that we were able to produce. It was fun. This is, you know, probably going to be my highlight of, you know, top highlight of all of my time in intermission, because, you know, there's probably going to be maybe, let's say, okay, well, there's probably going to be maybe 3/4 that intermission will be around, that I'll still be around as a student here. But so we'll see what happens with that. There's some reasons well, anyway, we'll see what happens with that. So this may be the biggest thing I do with intermission. So yes, I'm happy about it overall. However, I actually played oboe, as you saw in the video. I played oboe in the second half of the piece. We swapped conductors, and the swap was fine. Unfortunately, I've been having performance anxiety with oboe. Doesn't happen with conducting, but with oboe. And I flubbed the whole beginning of what I played at in the piece, and then made some mistakes later. And actually, what you hear on the YouTube video, I went back in studio and re-recorded the oboe part, and then carefully edited things out of the version on here. You can actually see a track here, oboe additions, with a few little snippets in there. So it's probably too small for you to read the text here, but yeah. So and this you know, issue with the anxiety with playing oboe has actually gotten worse, and I ended up having to quit intermission in last winter because of that, and some other stuff related. So, and I also kind of burned out on this piece. I spent about 50 hours on the pre-production, not counting the engraving and transcription, just like the pre-production for the video with the hacking the Wii U and all of that stuff, and then 20 hours on post-production. And it was basically spring break of spring of 2019 when we did this. It was my entire spring break, 8 hours a day doing the transcription, and then during the quarter, I spent a lot of my time on this. And I kind of burned out, and I don't really want to do, I don't really feel like I have the energy to do another big piece like this. So it's hard to be totally happy with the result when there's those kind of elements in it. But in terms of like, I don't blame anybody for us getting off and me having to cut out part of the video at the end. That's like, it's amazing that we were able to stay together for such a long chunk of it anyway. So I'm not upset about that.
Yeah, and I have to agree that like I think that this performance specifically was like probably one of Intermission's best performed, and it sounded really good even when during because I play viola on this piece, and during some of our breaks I will listen in and hear what the orchestra sounds like, and it really did sound a little bit more than just a anime game orchestra. It was something that just felt a little bit more profound than that. But I guess we should talk about the collaboration aspect that I missed somehow. So as far as collaboration go, you said that you worked with another transcriber for this piece. Can you tell me?
Brandon Paulson transcribed the Calamity Ganon Phase 1 and Phase 2 sections. And he transcribed that in MuseScore and then sent me the MIDI file. I did a little bit of touch-up editing on that afterwards. The collaborative process, though, I want to talk about is more from my experience from Material Collective than from Intermission, because basically for Intermission, my collaboration experience, well, every piece is a massive collaboration, but in terms of the arranging itself, it was basically this one and the Final Fantasy medley, which no offense to Ryan, basically he got it like 2/3 done and then had to drop the project and just gave me it. So I had to like just take what I had there and throw out pieces and redo pieces. So I don't blame him for that. He had his own obligations or whatever, but that wasn't really a collaboration. That was a rescue. So about the work I've done in Material Collective. Let me pull up a couple of these. So my most recent one, this is from Epoch, a tribute to Chrono Trigger. I'll play a little bit of the piece here. That's probably too loud. Like that. Is that a good volume? So this piece was arranged jointly by myself and this guy, Justin Levine from Material Collective. And what jointly arranged in this case meant was we basically sent MIDI files back and forth. So he arranged the first piece of it, first minute or so. I took the MIDI file, I fixed things and added a little bit more. Then he took it and fixed some of my things and added more, and we did that a few times. Eventually had one that we were both happy with. And that was, I was doing with the MIDI in Reaper. Then I moved it over to Dorico and did the engraving, though the engraving was not very difficult because there's only a 3-minute long piece, 4-minute long piece. Yeah, so that's one way to do it. And another piece that I did that same way is this one. So this piece, Eric Buchholz is in some ways one of maybe the top 3 Zelda music arrangers in the world. I was very fortunate to get to work with him. This was a Materia Collective album that was just title themes or menu themes from various different games. I don't know how much you can read this, but every track is a different game. And so we proposed Twilight Princess, and this is the opening theme from Twilight Princess that we arranged. And again, we sent MIDIs back and forth, but there was more, it was more larger scale changes. So I did a version of the first like A section, and I did it for 4-part choir, and then Eric redid it for 8-part choir because that was, there wasn't enough voices to do really interesting harmonies. And then he wrote a B section and I tweaked that, and then we worked on the ending. So yeah, again, sending MIDIs back and forth, everyone using some sort of, I forget what program he was using to make it, but I was doing the MIDIs in Reaper with just a basic vocal synth. And then, yeah, so the thing with Materia Collective is that once we get the arrangement, then we make parts and we send them out to members of the collective to record. So this is 27 people recording vocal parts, each of them recording multiple parts. We actually had like 52 total vocal parts across the 8 voices. And then we got the music back. People recorded them in their home studios, sent them back to us. We mixed them. So this is all, live people. Any more questions, Daniel?
I don't think so. I think this is a good time to open the floor up to any questions by any of the people watching. So feel free to just drop it in chat, or you can unmute yourselves and ask directly if you want to. Otherwise, we can just discuss. Oh, here's got one. So Creighton asks, how long does the process of collaboration take? I guess it depends, right?
Sure. for those two pieces where we sent MIDI back and forth, it was maybe, I don't know, each way, maybe 3 or 4 times. It wasn't that much longer than it would have been to do it by oneself, because you still need like time to iterate and think about things when you're doing arrangement, even if it's just you. So in some ways it's less, in some ways when you get something that's done, then you can just send it to somebody else and not have to think about it until you get something back from them. That's more, in some ways, that's kind of preferable. But yeah, it's not a huge difference in time. I guess if you're trying to do like sending MuseScore projects back and forth, that's maybe a little, I mean, MuseScore is a more difficult tool to make larger scale edits to your content of your music. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Just drop them in chat, or you can always just interrupt. It will not be rude to do so. So I'm curious. Do you remember what all the pieces that you've done for Intermission so far? I know you've done a couple of Final Fantasies and a bit of Zelda.
Yeah. Do I remember all of them? I mean, I can go through it. In winter 2017, I did the Breath of the Wild Switch trailer. Mm-hmm. In spring 2017, I did the Skyward Sword medley and the Ocarina of Time 3D end credits 2. In fall 2017, I did the first Breath of the Wild medley. In winter 2018, I did the Nausicaa medley. In spring 2018, I did the Twilight Princess ending end credits arrangement. In fall 2018, I did the Xenoblade arrangement, Xenoblade 2 Suite. In winter 2019, I took a break and didn't arrange anything. In spring 2019, I did this Breath of the Wild piece. In fall 2019, I did the Final Fantasy medley with Ryan. And then in winter, I left. So yes, I guess I remember all of them. I would like to do, this is probably your follow-up question, but what would I like to do left in Intermission? Mm-hmm. I would like to do Ocarina of Time end credits, because that is the piece of video game music that is the most meaningful to me. I have, as I was learning to do game music arrangements, I actually retranscribed that piece from scratch 4 times. Like every couple of years, I would just redo it because I wasn't satisfied with the version I had done the previous 2 years. And then several years ago, I wrote software that imports and exports MIDIs from first-party N64 games. So now I have the actual MIDI from Ocarina of Time, so I don't need to ever transcribe it again. Actually, I did contribute. The way I know Eric Buchholz, is that I provided the first version of the arrangement for the end credits from Ocarina of Time that was used on Hero of Time, which is Eric Buchholz's live orchestral arrangement album from Ocarina of Time. This was a couple years ago. He did a lot of changes, so I'm not like a co-arranger. I just like provided something that was somewhere between a transcription and a bit of an arrangement, and then he made a lot of changes. But that's I won't play the whole thing. It's 8 minutes long, but. This was played by a real orchestra in Slovakia. They hired evidently that's the cheapest place to hire a 64-person orchestra. And yes, it was a 64-piece orchestra for an Ocarina of Time album.
Nice,
yeah.
nice.
Does N64 get it?
Yeah, I get it. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be an awesome addition. With I can hear that totally being played by a really beautiful guitar and in the arrangement, unless you want to go into a different direction with it. But
no, I'd love to get a harp.
you're gonna.
In fact, we have somebody who plays harp, but we just don't have a harp.
No way.
Yeah, I forget who it was, but things that'll be probably we won't be back to normal with Intermission until next spring. So who knows what'll change in terms of our membership by then.
Yeah, but I didn't know we had a harpist. I've always harp players. I think they definitely have probably one of the hardest instruments to learn. So I have a lot of respect for harp players. So
I don't think it's one of the hardest instruments. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I think.
Well, what would you say is the hardest instrument?
It depends on how you count things, but in some ways, I would say trumpet is the hardest instrument. Mm-hmm. In some ways, I would say any of the strings, violin probably is the hardest instrument. In some ways, piano is the hardest instrument. In some ways, it's the easiest instrument. Pipe organ is pretty hard.
Oh yeah, pipe organ's hard.
Could be a feat too. I mean, bassoon and oboe are hard in some ways, but they're really not that much harder than the other woodwinds. Bassoon sort of takes it in one direction with the difficulty, and oboe takes it in a different direction with the difficulty. But it's with the embouchure and stuff. But it's not really that bad.
Yeah.
I would say like the people who struggle the most with playing in a technically correct way in Intermission would be trumpets and violins.
Mm-hmm.
No offense to them, it's just like trumpets, it's when you go high it gets hard, and then violins, it's when you go high it's hard to get the note right unless you have perfect pitch or very good like relative pitch or something, and only a couple of folks in each section have that. So yeah.
All right. Well, I guess nobody really has any remaining questions. If you do have one,
everybody?
If anyone wants to, you can just pop it in the chat while I ask what I will think will be the last question, and we can go ahead and wrap things up early. Oh wow, it slipped out of my mind while I was talking. Hold on, give me one moment. Oh, there it is. What is one piece of advice you would want to give to any up-and-coming arrangers, new arrangers, and returning arrangers?
For Intermission or just in general?
I guess maybe in general, actually. Yeah.
Well, I guess I would say two things. One is like the same kind of advice that anybody who is more experienced at something would give to someone who is less experienced at that. Is like, it's okay if you suck at first. That's how you learn. If you put a bunch of work into it, you will get better. And I've been doing game music arranging for 13, 14 years. So that's why I can do this. It's not, it doesn't happen overnight. And some of the people in Intermission have made a lot faster progress at becoming good arrangers than I did when I was at the beginning. So if that's any consolation. And I also don't think I'm the best arranger that Intermission has had. I think Philip is actually a better arranger than I am. And I think David is not a better arranger in terms of the maximum quality, but in terms of quality per amount of time it takes him to do the piece, I think he has a higher ratio. So I'm not going to say I'm on the top or anything like that. But yeah, the other thing in terms of like Intermission arrangers, I guess the biggest thing is get your piece done before the first rehearsal, like enough before the first rehearsal that you have practiced it, that you have practiced conducting several times, and that you have already talked to key people, if there's a soloist or like a hard piano part or something, you've talked to and gone over the piece with them before the first rehearsal. If you have like the very first, GVM week 1 or week 0, whatever it is, if you do that, you will have such an advantage over so many other arrangers. And I'm not saying like it's a competition, but like you have such an advantage over how a lot of people end up actually being with intermission.
Right. Well, since there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you so much, Louis, for joining us. It's been a treat and a pleasure, and we gained a lot from your insight. So thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, and for everyone else, we'll have our final workshop next week, where we will be discussing the percussion section, other remaining instruments that we haven't gotten to talk about yet, and format and some proper good score formatting stuff. So I hope to see you there, same time, same Zoom link. And yeah, I hope you guys have a safe, good week and have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.